All right, guys, welcome. I have real estate broker Austin Witt out of the greater Nashville area. He's going to chat with us today, help us try to understand some of this buy side chaos that's going down. Austin, how are you today?
Hey, doing well. I saw your video last week and I'm super excited to jump on and talk about real estate, specifically those written agreements and kind of what we're seeing on the real estate side of things. So excited to join you.
Thank you, seriously, for joining me. Obviously, you can attest to, since you and I have spoken over the last few weeks, how many calls in I'm getting on my end trying to understand it, help the audience understand a little bit from your side what you're seeing.
Yep. So on our side, the written agreements are causing quite a bit of confusion with buyers. I know a lot of that comes from the top down, and there's a lot of different direction on what is required, what isn't required, when you're supposed to have something signed. So I think a lot of that confusion is falling into consumers being really confused about what is and what isn't. So,
So when you say top down, help everybody understand where you're going with that or what you mean by that.
yep. So the lawsuit actually fundamentally comes down from the National Association of Realtors. They've set down guidelines that have then been pushed down through the local associations, the local brokerages, and then essentially down to the real estate agents that are associated with those brokerages. So what you're seeing as between those layers, there's slightly different information that seems to be getting conflated. And at the bottom level where we're all at, there's a little bit of confusion there. So,
And that makes sense when you take a step back and understand how many different layers this thing is going down by the time it gets to the person communicating with the consumer, which is really what we're talking about here is consumer protection and consumer advocacy. How do we help them? There's a little bit of a skewed messages that might be going off. We're not saying our message here that we're going to talk about is exactly 100% correct. We're giving our opinion and our feedback based on what we've been hearing over the last few weeks.
correct. Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces with this. There's going to be a lot of different interpretations, especially when it comes to different states and their legal guidelines within the states. But at the end of the day, I think you're right. The general goal of this is to bring transparency to the forefront and have good, honest conversations with buyers before they start the real estate processes.
Okay, so we're gonna leave the listing agent and the listing side of the transaction. We're gonna kind of set that off to the side here for a minute and really try to focus on the people who are saying, hey, I think I might want to be in the market to purchase something tomorrow, or it could be a week or a year or two down the line. Sound good?
Perfect. Yep.
All right, so um Austin, most of the people that are looking to buy a home fall in love with some shiny object that they see out there. And it's typically online right now. It's over 50% of people are finding that house online right now that they want to go look at. Sound right to you?
Yeah. Yep. I'd say absolutely. Yeah, it's right
Okay.
on the bus.
So they are typically reaching out to you guys. Tell us how that goes a little bit, and we'll try to fill in the pieces, backfill.
Yeah, yep. So we'll take a look at the historic way of how we've done it for the last 10 years. So you're exactly right. The consumer sees the house on Zillow. They're interested. They click the shiny blue button. They get connected with a local agent. And then that agent would typically show up at the home to show that client the property. They'd maybe take a look at a couple different homes together, the agent would try their best to go ahead and capture some sort of agreement, whether it be verbal or written, to continue the relationship with that client. So it all started with the home. We start the relationship. Now, with the new NAR guidelines, we're going to have to get those written agreements signed before you go to check out those properties. So it's a huge shift for a majority of the transactions that we're going to see.
Okay, so the messaging that we're seeing right now coming through the agents, which again is typically being forced down from their brokers who they work for, or they're licensed under, I guess we could say. What are we seeing right now that's coming out just as we're about to go live here? It's 8/6, we got 11 days. Some people have gone live right now. What are we seeing right now?
What we're seeing a lot of right now are agents communicating that buyers are required to sign some sort of exclusive buyer broker or buyer agency agreement, which essentially locks that buyer in with that agent upon them signing that agreement, is what we're seeing at that surface level, direct real estate agent to consumer.
Okay.
So the in the way that this gets conflated, I've got to memorize, I've done it a few times here. So the
You're good.
NAR guidelines are that MLS participants working with buyers must obtain written agreements before touring properties. Nowhere in there does it say exclusive buyer agency, and nowhere does it say buyers are required to. So again, there's some conflating information which is getting passed down ultimately to the consumer, and they're just not sure what's going on right now.
Okay, so the states that I've been working in or out of the last 29 years of doing this, there hasn't been a lot of buyer broker agreements in place in writing. Uh, Typically it just hasn't worked that way. We've worked off the old way where there's cooperative commission sharing, which now is out the window, which is why we're talking about this in the first place. Now you've been a part of the buyer broker agreements for some time, as are a bunch of other people around the country in different states, correct?
Correct. Yep. We've had access to both the exclusive and the non-exclusive agency agreements for as long as I've been doing this. Yep.
Okay. So in your mind, right now, based on the information we have, what are the, I'm coming up with about 3 or 4 different ways a buyer can go view that home. You've touched on the first one that we're hearing a lot about, which is the exclusive buyer broker agreement, right? Okay,
Correct.
what are the other couple ways that a consumer can go see a home?
Yep. And this will be important to say. It's different amongst each of the states. Every state's going to have their own guidelines. Certain states are going to call things differently than other states.
Yep.
But as a general overall, you have your exclusive buyer agency, which essentially locks the buyer in with that specific agent. You'll have what are called non-exclusive agency agreements, which essentially allows the consumer to work with a number of different real estate professionals,
Okay.
just as long as they haven't signed an exclusive with another agent. Here in Tennessee, you can be a facilitator or a transaction broker. Uh,
Okay.
for all intents and purposes, it's a glorified, someone's going to be pushing paperwork to help facilitate a contract through. Um, those are the main three big ones. I think the touring agreements that you're hearing a lot about will also feed into that transaction broker or facilitator status in a way a buyer in which a buyer can be represented. Or
Okay.
it's
And then there's a fourth one I'm thinking in my head, which is I don't want to sign an agreement. I want to go see this house that Austin has listed. How do I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you still, as far as most states are concerned, most states have no legal requirement for buyers to sign any sort of written agreement at all.
Okay.
So you could still reach out directly to the listing agent to view the property that way. You could still technically view it at open houses. There's a number of different ways you can see it, even without having to engage with an agent on the buy side.
Okay. So this is super important right now that the buyer is explain these options as they reach out to you, Austin, right out of the gate that says, I'm thinking about doing this, or I saw this house that I'm not saying this is the house I'm going to buy, Austin, but I'm really starting to get serious about my search. And, how do I go about doing this? What are these different ways? And I think that you just nailed it with there's 3 to 4 right now, different ways they can do it. Um, so pros and cons of each. Let's just do a real quick pros and cons. So exclusive buyer agency agreement. Give me a pro to that for the consumer.
Yeah, the pro for the consumer is you do know exactly what you're getting into. You have one specific person. It could eliminate potential confusion amongst who's showing you what properties, who to reach out to. You've got one person, you're theirs, and all is good. So there's a little bit, it can be less confusion when you're working with one agent directly.
And inside that agreement, there is going to be a realtor fee that you agree to pay this agent, correct?
Correct. With the agency relationships, whether exclusive or non, there is going to be a fee associated with the services rendered by that agent. Correct.
Okay, so negative of the exclusive, what would it be a negative be in your
Yeah,
mind?
negative in my mind with the way the new changes are going to roll out. It may not be in the buyer's best interest to get jammed up with one specific agent
Okay,
without necessarily knowing how they do or don't work. Is the agent on time? Does the agent respond to their phone calls? Is the agent actually sending them homes that they're interested in purchasing? So when you do sign an exclusive agreement before you've had a chance to see them in action, you could put yourself at a disadvantage as a consumer.
makes total sense. Okay, non-exclusive, quick pros there that you
Yep,
can
Quick
think
Pro.
of.
Yeah, Quick Pro for the non-exclusive. It's gonna be, I believe, more transparent for consumers, and it's going to allow them the opportunity to work with multiple different agents, almost like you're going to be going on interviews with several agents and picking the one that works the best with you. It doesn't jam somebody up right from the very start as they're beginning their home buying process.
And non-exclusive, they can sign an agreement with one agent. And if down the road they feel more comfortable with a different agent, they can then start working with the different agent, correct?
They could sign another non-exclusive, correct. You could essentially sign as many non-exclusives as you want, with the caveat being
Okay,
when you do sign an exclusive, you should probably tell everybody else that you have signed an exclusive and you've chosen to work with somebody specifically.
okay, so from the consumer side, any negatives to the non-exclusive that you can come up with?
There could be some times where you feel like your agent maybe doesn't have your full backing because it's the non-exclusive, and they may be more apt to help buyers that they've signed exclusive agreements with. Could be one potential. Although I don't see that happening, but it could be.
Okay, all right, so touring slash transaction slash, what was the other word you
Uh,
gave the third one?
we call them facilitators here in
Facilitator.
Tennessee. Yep.
Okay, quick pro there to that one.
Quick pro to that one. So you are not an agent for either party. You are essentially just helping to facilitate the exchange of information to get the deal done. So one of the pros to that type of agreement is the fee could be significantly less than one that you'd pay an agent with an agency agreement.
Okay, that makes sense. They're putting the paperwork together, helping answer a couple questions and moving it back and forth to get everything signed in the correct spots, etc.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Negative to that would be, or any other positives you can think on that one?
I would say that's the main positive. And then
Okay.
the negative to that one is that you don't actually have an agent representing your interest in the transaction. They are strictly there to push the paperwork
You're fighting the fight kind of on your own.
on your own, and you just have a real estate professional helping you make sure that you're meeting your deadlines within the contract and understanding that to the best of your ability. Yep.
Okay. And then the fourth one, we'll call them the unrepresented buyer who's reaching out to gain access to look at a property.
Yep.
Pros there.
Pros there, if in theory you know what you're doing and you're reaching out directly to the seller or the listing agent, if you're a savvy consumer, you may be able to snag a discount if done properly and going the route of unrepresented.
And not required to sign anything.
Not required to sign anything. Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And the con there is you might
The
be
double-edged
getting,
sword. It can go
yep,
the other direction very quickly. You can think you're getting a deal on the side, and you could find out the listing agent's still collecting a full 6% where you felt they were only collecting 2 or 3. So may give you a false sense of your negotiating powers or what you're paying people.
okay, so that is wonderful information. As we move forward, we're going to start to get different levels of these agreements out as samples for people to view, and then we'll start commenting on the different line items on the actual forms. Let's touch base real quick on the decoupling of list side and buy side. Now the buyer, when they do go into a transaction here, if they go through one of these four channels and they say, I'm ready to move forward and do something, they're agreeing to pay realtor commissions um, either out of their pocket or there could be some help coming from the seller. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, especially with the agency agreements, you are agreeing upfront to any type of compensation in which you're going to pay the agent that represents your interest in that transaction. Correct.
Would you still be doing that on a touring or transaction or facilitator?
Yep, those still
Okay,
will have some sort of compensation tied in there. Again,
okay.
because there's no agency relationship involved, those fees could be very different than what you would find custom or more regular on the agency agreements.
Again, we're talking about from the buy side, different levels of services and or people protecting, helping protect yourself, helping
Correct.
protect you so you don't get into too much trouble.
Correct. I would expect either the exclusive or the non-exclusive to have higher fees overall than, let's say, a transaction broker or facilitator. I would just imagine that those fees will be higher.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, Talk to me a little bit about the lawsuit. One of the problems they had with the lawsuit was the consumers felt that they weren't getting a fair shake in terms of negotiating the realtor fees. So what really happened there from your end, or what did you see happening where the consumer kind of ran into trouble or was being stonewalled in terms of negotiating those fees with you agents?
Yeah, yep. So this goes back a little bit. So I believe in somewhere around 2016, 2017 was when a lot of these lawsuits first started. At that time, realtors were allowed to advertise that their services were free, even if the seller was going to pay them. It wasn't actually up until 2022 when NAR changed their code of ethics
Okay.
and they told buy side agents that they are no longer allowed to say that their services are free. So I think a lot of what's happened up till at least 2022, if not later, is that buyers were just under the impression that their agent services were free. So there was no point of even having a conversation. They were free. So that's all changed post Department of Justice lawsuits, and it really kind of started 2022 onward about the messaging that, hey, your services are no longer free. Do not advertise as such.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was um, I think what we're going to start to see is uh, the messaging coming from the agents being a move to the exclusive with a percentage of a sales price for their commission fees.
Yep.
Um, the thing that never really made sense to me was how do we get a buyer to agree on a percentage of a sales price for a home that we haven't even made an offer on and we don't know how much we're making? That always was a little troublesome. Give me your thoughts, your take on that, and what you see happening here, in the next couple weeks, couple months.
Yeah. So I think the great thing in all of this is it's definitely going to open up those transparent conversations on the front end of things. So at the end of the day, if the consumer and the agent feel comfortable with the percentage, by all means, go the percentage route. If you think any deal makes the most sense and you understand it, by all means, rock and roll. This is supposed to bring transparency and more consumer choices. So let's rock with that. I personally believe in the flat fee as opposed to a percentage of the purchase price. I think having a flat fee better aligns with my client's priorities. So specifically for me,
Again, this
I
is from buy side only, folks.
buy
For
side
those of
only.
you watching, nothing to do with listing side.
Correct. Buy side only. So the median price here in Nashville, Tennessee is about 500,000. I
Okay.
think as a result of different options and choices, consumers are going to shop more. When those consumers shop, fees will come down. I think
Okay.
ultimately fees are going to go from near 3% to near 2%. So my fee will be, for example, $10,000, whether you buy a $500,000 home, 750, a million, 300,000, it's a flat fee. That way there's no additional incentive for me to get you at a higher purchase price.
Now, you still are allowed to help your buyer that you're representing, whether in an exclusive or a non-exclusive, to write an offer that asks for some help from the seller. Doesn't mean the seller is going to accept or has to accept,
Correct.
but you're allowed to ask for that to try to offset some of those
Offset.
fees. Okay, great.
Correct. And the best case scenario in this situation like this is the consumer is going to know exactly what they're going to need to bring to closing right up front. And you have the conversation, if we can get extra, your cash to close comes down by X amount. So just again, just really just brings transparency to the very, very front of everything that we're doing.
Okay, so, let's pop over to my side for just a second. I wanted to
Yeah.
see if you have any questions you needed to throw at me regarding how us lenders are trying to get ready for these changes, because it affects us on our side as well.
Yeah. So one of the things I think I was most intrigued about in watching your video last week was your talks about having those really good conversations with your buyers up front and really discussing how much you're paying your agent at the front of it. So I
Okay.
think what I would like to know is how are you managing those expectations if maybe a client doesn't have the cash to close needed with the agent that made that referral to you, how you go about maneuvering or having conversations with the buyer and having agents with different fees and how you go about making recommendations to
Okay.
agents.
The first thing that's coming to my mind is it's basically a new line item on the pre-qualification. So typically the consumer will come over to me. In my case, I've been doing it for a long, long time. So I have a lot of past clients that will actually come to me prior to coming to you. But in most scenarios out there, it's more common for them to see the real estate agent before they come talk to the lender in terms
Right.
of getting a pre-approval. They're coming to their lenders for, or their realtor saying, is there anybody that you think I should work with or talk to help me get qualified to purchase this home? And then that consumer will make their way over to us. But one of the biggest changes that I think the agents are having trouble with from our side is we have to take into account now that this 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4%, whatever it is that you guys are agreeing, the buyer's agreeing to pay you, it may be coming out of their pocket as opposed to what you just described, where up until 2022, you guys were saying it was free to the
Yep.
buyers. So that never made its way to our pre-qual at all.
Okay.
And now it is. So at that point in time, when we're going through our pre-qualification, we're asking for what agreement have you signed with your real estate agent?
Yep.
And they're either going to provide us with that agreement, and it might be one of the four that we discussed in the earlier part of the video, or it might be, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Have you had any of those conversations so far?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
We've had plenty, and it's exciting for us to become involved to help them understand, what they can do as a buyer and how they can navigate this and what it means to them before they get into a position where it says, we're going to send you something on a DocuSign, just sign it real quick, and then we'll let you into the house.
Yep.
That's
Yeah, we've
what's
talked about that a lot. We're not looking to get consumers jammed up from the very start. Yep, it makes your job easier, consumers' life easier when they've got some options up front and they can have good, honest, transparent conversations up front. Yep.
as far as the cash to close situation. Man, over the last 4 years, it's been remarkable people's ability to come up with cash. Whether it's asking a family member, a mom or dad, a sister, brother, aunt, uncle, or borrowing from a 401k. Consumers have had the ability to do that more so than at any point of me doing this, for the last 29 years. That doesn't mean we're not going to run into that as we move forward, and things get tighter. So it will require a great amount of stick handling by us to help them see on the backside when they get to the closing table what the actual check may have to be.
Yep.
So the agents that I'm speaking with are struggling putting those pieces of together of, in order for Kirk to do his job, he has to be communicating the four options you gave up front, what it means to cash to close, who may be offsetting some of your realtor fees or who may not be. And that's the way that it is going to be going forward. It sounds like forever.
Yep.
So there's a little more opportunity for us from the lending side to state an opinion. And if we have some people who have signed a touring or a non-exclusive, there's an opportunity to talk to them where it may be in your advantage to speak with a couple other people that may be a better fit for you.
Yep.
And the realtors are not happy about that, or the real estate agents, that could or may or probably will occur, which is kind of out of their control.
It is at this point. And I know your industry went through that back in post 2008. It was highly encouraged for consumers to shop. Fees essentially came down. So your industry's already experienced this. So I feel like
Yes.
we should probably lean on you guys a little bit more to kind of figure out what may or may not happen and how to work through some of those processes of change.
Yep. Absolutely. That was the biggest feedback we got from the video last week, was just like heads were popping off, a little bit of, wait, what? Because it really hasn't made its way down to the lender side, because not a lot of these transactions have been done yet. That's going to change here in the next 2 weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how this thing winds through the systems here, and what adjustments probably will be made along the way, right? They always are.
Yep. Yep. Little adjustments.
Okay.
It's going to be interesting though to watch it all work itself out. That's for sure.
Anything else from my side that I didn't clarify that maybe you were thinking?
No, I think for me, the takeaway here is a lot of this comes down to just consumer education, sharing the processes, how it works, why it works, providing options, and just allowing consumers to make educated decisions that make the most sense for them.
I can't say it any better. Great job. Thank you so much for
Yeah, thanks for having me on this.
yeah, sharing your knowledge. I really, really appreciate it. We're gonna do it again. We just
Yeah.
want everybody to keep asking questions, try to keep the frustration levels to a minimum.
Right.
It's hard. I get it.
Hard at times. Yep.
All right, man. Have a great day, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.